Good evening and welcome to the first of two Inside Government programs for the spring 2018 semester here at KU Community College, and broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. Well, we're back after a quick break where students were getting some training here at the college, but we are delighted to have in the studio today Auburn City Manager Jeff DYGERT to give us a city update before he gives his State of the City speech next week at the KU County Chamber of Commerce's annual luncheon, featuring both the leadership of the city and the county. Among the issues we'll be discussing with him over the next half hour will be those dealing with the construction of a new visitor center, what's going on at Owasco Lake, downtown parking, the search for a replacement for City Comptroller Laura Wills, as well as maybe a little bit of baseball since this is spring training. Welcome back.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be here.
So let's talk about what's in the paper this afternoon,
Okay.
Because that's the freshest here. Literally when we talk about algal blooms, and that the city has just been asked to take part in a study by the EPA.
Right.
What are you being asked to do?
Really, we've got just a little bit of detail on that right now. We don't have the full scope of what the program is. Essentially, we're going to be asked to collect data, collect samples, collect data and things like that for a larger.
Paid to do this?
We won't be paid, but we're also really not on the hook for anything other than a little bit of time, and the benefit to us is a better understanding of the situation.
And this is for the greater good to understand how these blooms occur?
Right, because you know, as you go even across the region, right, between us and Skaneateles Lake and Cayuga Lake, there are differences in the biology of the lakes and what that results in, but across the country we have that same issue. So this is to help on a higher level, try to get a better understanding of the situation.
So really no out-of-pocket expenses, just helping along with the process?
Correct.
So the other interesting that's online right now, and we were talking about it before we started, was the use of ultrasonic buoys to deal with algal blooms.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something the city might be looking at?
I think it's something that it's an option that's out there, so we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the community to look at it. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've got any preconceived notion that we're going to definitely head in that direction.
How did this discussion come about?
It's my understanding, actually, that one of the water treatment plant operators, Sam Granado, was actually doing a little homework on his own, checking into things, and that's, you know, to me, I think is really good that we have employees that care enough that they're researching things on their own, trying to figure out what's what and what possible solutions are. And he came across this technology that's out there that essentially is a solar-powered buoy that utilizes ultrasonic, I might be using the wrong term, but
that's
for lack of a better, like an ultrasonic sound wave to basically keep the harmful algal blooms from happening in the first place. So it's something we could look at. It certainly.
Has anybody met with the company? I guess there's a
I
company
think that's all stuff that would potentially happen in the future. It's very early on now. It's an interesting concept. I'm sure it would be a controversial concept because, you know, we all want clean water, but one of the issues, if you read the article, is, you know, one of the proposals from the company based on the surface area of the lake is approximately 30 buoys in the lake. So
water hazards.
Water hazards, you know, the visual clutter and things like that. But
I would think, though, I'd rather see a buoy than blue-green algae out my door.
And those are things that we'll have to see what the community feels about those things.
So just on that particular, and I think there was a $1.2 million price tag if you did something like that.
Right.
Is that something you would look at the federal or state government trying to help you out on?
Well,
especially if the
I think
asking.
As it's a relatively new technology, it hasn't been utilized a lot necessarily. Obviously, in the United States, it may be something that the state would look at on an experimental basis to see what happens.
Used in Europe.
Too soon to tell.
So just finally on the waterfront, literally, anything the city is doing right now, you made some major investments with some state money that you received last June. Are there any other items that you're dealing with right now, getting prepared for this summer?
So we are fairly confident that we're in good shape this coming summer based on the performance of the PAC system, the powder activated carbon system, that was installed temporarily last year. So the plan this year moving forward is to purchase that unit that was a rental last year, that we'll purchase that same unit. And there are some upgrades that we can do to make that more of a permanent installation and make it a little bit easier for personnel to deal with, and less manual adjustments, less manual loading, things like that can be done. Downstream further, at the actual water filtration plant, we noticed last year that we had some deficiencies in removing some of the solids from the filtration system, and basically there's a lagoon adjacent to the property that holds sludge. Doesn't sound real nice, but it holds sludge from the process. And there were some deficiencies.
This is when all the water's gone through the system, though.
Yep. So all that stuff that gets cleaned out after the clean water heads down the pipe to your house, the stuff that's left over goes and gets separated out. So we have to do some upgrades with that, and our municipal utilities and engineering department are working with GHD again to GHD, which was the engineering firm that helped us with the powder activated carbon system. So we're working with them again.
So are these all general fund expenditures, or this stuff you're going to bond for?
This is water sewer fund stuff. So it would be water fund expenditures. And again, we've had a very good relationship with New York State DEC and Department of Health, and they've really stepped up to a great extent, helping us with grant funding to do these things.
Do you see rates going up at all?
I think right now, as we stand, we're in good shape, and that's again thanks to the efforts of some of our state officials and advocates at the state level to get us funding to offset those costs.
So as you look out your window on the second floor of City Hall, you have a beautiful view of a parking lot that is under construction.
Yes.
So what's the status of the Visitor Center right now?
The Visitor Center is, as you said, it's under construction. They are working on the foundation work for that structure. So obviously doing concrete work in the weather we've had has been a little bit problematic, but they're forging ahead. They have a very tight deadline on that project.
Their expectation is to be done by October.
Their expectation is to welcome
the governor
in October. Yes. So, very aggressive timeline on that, and you know, I think once the weather breaks, you're going to start seeing some really significant, fast-moving process.
We've asked in the past, and I know this has been literally a fluid system. Do you have an idea of what it's going to cost now?
The total project? Total project is still right around that $10 million mark. And those are state funds. It's state funded.
So the only city commitment is the land?
Correct.
How about some design?
We had a little in-kind in the beginning, right around $200,000.
Design and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've lost, in essence, because you're putting a building up, and we should remember that 50 years ago there was a building there. Have you seen an increase as a result in the parking garage?
About 1,000 cars a month. I just reviewed some of that information within the last couple of days. We're seeing about 1,000 more cars a month in the parking garage. So if you figure that out, I mean, we're only talking probably on average maybe 50 cars a day in there during business hours. So definitely an increase, but it's not.
And you've incentivized people to, there's some free parking in there.
2 hours of free parking. Yep.
And you've done that just to get people to use it. I know you've also broken open a wall, which I would guess would be the southwest side, so people can come in and out.
There's some discussion about how that might fit into a pedestrian access way.
Was it deliberately opened like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. It's not, the wall didn't fall apart.
A little exploratory surgery there to see what was there. So.
And where are you on the Court Street lot? That was...
we are ready to go on the Court Street lot. What we are waiting for right now is we're trying to coordinate with the county. For years, Cayuga County has had a flooding issue with the basement of the county office building. So we've been working with them. They want to make some upgrades to drainage in their rear parking lot area to alleviate that flooding issue.
There's some slope areas from Westlake that come down across your
really that whole area behind the county office building is a big bowl.
Okay.
And it collects a lot of runoff and it becomes a problem. So We're working with the county to try to coordinate a drainage system that will help alleviate their problems, and then it'll also in turn catch any runoff from that Court Street
So
area.
how many extra spots will you have there?
That's going to get us about a net increase of about 20 spots.
And that'll still be a city lot. You're not giving it to YMCA, and you'll meter it.
It'll be a kiosk lot is what the
Okay.
plan is for that.
And there were some concerns raised by some of the residents and businesses on Court Street. Have they been resolved to the best of your?
To the best of my ability, they've been resolved. To the best of my knowledge, they've been resolved. We're going to make some improvements in that area that hopefully, once people see what those improvements are and see them actually play out, I think people will be pleased with that. We're going to try to clean up the park a little bit and maintain the park a little bit better than we have in the past as well.
So while those projects are all going on, you're in the middle of budget at this point. You unfortunately received a resignation late last year, earlier this year from Laura Wills, your comptroller. When did she leave?
You've got to ask me that. I don't remember the date.
But sometime
I've struck that date in my mind.
Sometime in January.
So it's been 4 to 6 weeks now, I think.
But she's still doing work for you.
Yep, we've retained her on a contract basis to help get us through the budget process, and she was very good about doing that. We've got a couple other fairly technical projects that we're working on. She's still working on those with us.
And
as
she went to
time
go
allows.
work for Fitzpatrick Nuclear.
One of the nuclear facilities.
Okay. And one of the reasons, she was a commuter.
Correct.
And while she had an exemption from the residency requirement because her husband also had a residency requirement for Oswego County. Am I correct on
Correct.
that? So where are you in the search process for her replacement?
We were accepting resumes through March 9th. Through March 9th, we collected approximately 20 resumes. We are going through that list. I'm hoping that by next week we're starting to schedule some interviews with people that have, risen to the top of that.
And do you see yourself, let's say you do interviews next week and you had to still do reference checks and make offers, do you see anybody on before you're releasing the budget in early May, late April?
Well, I think our best case scenario is that we get somebody on in early May, but I wouldn't doubt that it would take us till mid to late May to actually do that, provided we find the right candidate in that mix.
So Ms. Wills was she the candidate through the third search or the second search?
I don't recall.
That was before you.
Yeah, I wasn't part of that
Okay,
process at the
but
time.
one of the reasons there was multiple searches that you had an issue with residency with other candidates. Is that something that you'll still be looking at? Is whether that person will be a resident of the city of Auburn?
It's an important aspect of what we're looking for. Is it everything? I guess for the right candidate, we might be willing to look at something else. I mean, those are some case-by-case basis issues. It looks like we have some good local or regional candidates that might be willing to relocate based on what I'm seeing. So.
Okay. And how's this impacting your budget work?
It's just making it a little bit crazier, that's all. So it's a little more difficult than it has been in the past. It was always nice to work side by side with Laura and be able to have her immediately input facts and figures.
And was she here during all of your tenure as city manager?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your plan still is to release a budget by the end of April, beginning of May?
We're sticking to the schedule right at the moment.
So where are you in the process?
So this week I've been meeting with department heads to review their proposed budgets and get a better feel.
And they all came in under what they spent last year,
yeah,
right?
Something like that. So we go, basically I go line by line with each department and the department head going through their budget to identify, increases, decreases, figure out what their justifications are, make some preliminary adjustments, and then we'll recalculate, see where we're at, see what that's looking like, and then see if we have to make any more changes.
So last year you did not do a tax increase because the city school, one of the arguments that was made was that because the city had to go right to the tax cap,
Right.
the city was not going to raise taxes. Am I correct on that?
Basically, we didn't have a tax increase last year.
So do you think you're going to have one this year?
That's maybe it's too soon to tell. I wouldn't doubt if we have to do something. We're going to try to reduce it,
You
lessen
still
the
have to pay
impact
for
of that.
labor agreements and,
Yep.
and
So
all
we've got new labor agreements. We're in discussions right now with CSEA and their labor agreement. The cost of doing
Is
business.
that your
just
largest single unit is
Yes.
CSA? Okay.
Yep. So the cost of doing business just in general continues to rise. We've got the tax cap to consider.
So I was going to ask about that. So you have the 2% tax cap, and as we've explained on this show at least
Not
57
2%.
times, it's not 2%.
Right.
So do you have a number where you have been given by the state of what the maximum you can go up to?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
But you will have that before May?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
State has released its budget. Have they given you any extra aid?
Right now, the way the state budget is looking is the budget that the governor proposed really keeps most of that state aid pretty flat. There are some things right now through the work of NICOM and different efforts through the
New York Conference of Mayors.
New York Conference of Mayors, yes.
Yeah, just so people know.
The Conference of Mayors, and we had a strong delegation of from the city of Auburn City Council that went up and advocated for some changes. So, different things like we've talked for years, the arterial highway maintenance hasn't changed since the 1980s. So the allocation to the city of Auburn and all cities across New York State has stayed the same since the 1980s. And so we've been pushing hard for the last couple of years to see an increase in that. There's a Senate proposal out there to increase that to pretty much double that.
The governor did not do that in his budget.
No, so we're going to have to see how some of these battles play out and
So is there any, the flip side of whether they give you more money or not is, did they give you any mandate relief?
No.
Okay.
We're pretty much
Status quo.
Pretty much status quo, yes. There's some things out there like the Extreme Winter Road Program money that's out there that gets approved or re-energized on an annual basis. This year we're slated to get about $90,000 for that, and next year it's not in the budget, but the assembly actually is trying to push to
and you should have some
that.
fairly, the governors, they're still aiming to do the budget before Easter, so you've got about
right. So
10 working days.
March 31st should be the date that,
and that'll give you a good idea of where you are. So one thing that is still moving ahead is Genesee Street and what you're doing there. So first of all, there's going to be is it a full reconstruction of Genesee Street?
It's going to be a resurfacing that'll take into account some changes, a few curbing changes here and there at intersections and crosswalks to make things more accessible.
And it goes from where to where?
Okay, it goes from Genesee Street, or what some people refer to as West Genesee Street, but it's the west end of Genesee Street, just plain Genesee Street.
Over at South Street.
Yep, starts at South Street and goes all the way to the city line, the Aurelius town line, Auburn city line. So it'll go that entire distance. It's
how long will that take?
It should be done by the end of summer.
And does that mean totally closing off that roadway or doing half at a time?
No, they'll be working in sections, probably roughly three sections. They'll split that project up into. Traffic will be maintained throughout the project, with the exception potentially of a day here or there where there's something going on where they actually have to
block
detour traffic.
Okay.
But they plan on keeping two-way traffic.
How much will this cost?
It's about a $4 million project, and about 95% of that is reimbursable or being paid for through other than city taxpayer funds.
And so the flip side of that, as you know, is that there's going to be some changes in parking.
Yes.
So, as they say, explain this to us.
Okay, so federal guidelines for particular types of roadways require back-in angled parking or diagonal parking. Parallel parking.
Okay.
Yes. So we want to maintain some form of diagonal parking, whether
because
it be
you
pull
will
in
lose
or back
how
in.
many slots if you?
Oh, I don't remember the exact number, but it's
plus.
pretty significant.
Okay.
It's around 30 spots, which downtown would be pretty significant. It would certainly open up the width of the roadway, the driving lanes, but it would certainly reduce the number of parking spots downtown, and so it's going to become a learning experience for all of us.
So they do this in parts of downtown Syracuse.
Yes.
Many of those areas, though, are, as I remember them, and I may be incorrect, are overnight accommodations or apartments where people pull in, and there's not a lot of turnover. So your hope is that there's an hour or two where people are downtown, whether they're doing business or going to an appointment or having lunch. From a public safety point of view, your former fire chief, concerns?
My concern is getting through that initial period and getting people comfortable with it. You know, I know we're going to have a lot of complaints about it. It's really essentially out of our hands. Our counselors, you know, have done what they can to try to see what they can do. Our staff's done what they can do to try to see if we can get some sort of an exemption, and there isn't. The bottom line is it's different. There's pros and cons to it. I think compared to doing parallel parking, it's still a better choice than parallel parking. Less maneuvering involved in the end to actually park like this.
So the comment I've heard, and I've been sent emails on, for all the effort the city has put in downtown, will back-in parking scare people away from downtown? Is that a worry?
It's a concern because I'm sure there are folks out there that will avoid that. I guess the response to that would be there are other alternatives, like the parking garage. There are other alternatives like the side streets.
You're not going to have to back into the parking garage.
Right, and the surface lots and things like that. So there are other alternatives directly adjacent to Genesee Street. And again, it's something that's new, that's different.
And we deal so well with change and different.
And it's tough, you know, dealing with the human aspect of things is tough. If we had been backing in for 30 years and we changed to drive-in diagonal parking, people would probably be concerned about backing out into traffic, which is essentially where this whole thing comes from, is the hazard that's created by backing blindly out into traffic, which is...
So I would be remiss, at least personally, if I didn't ask this. You're doing South Street to the Genesee Street line. You're going to time any stoplights? You're going to change any of the...
We're doing Genesee Street?
Yes.
To the city line.
Yeah, you're going to time any lights?
Some of that ends up being outside of our control. There's actually no signal work being done in the project, so it's again, it's a repaving project.
So you are, I mentioned at the top of the show, next week you are giving your State of the Speech. You and the mayor will switch off and do that. Pat Mahunik, who will be here on Tuesday, he and Justin Woods will be doing the counties. So as far as you're concerned, what is the state of the city right now?
We're in good shape. I don't think we're in the kind of shape where you can sit back and just ride it out. I think we have to still be very judicious about everything that we do and watch everything that we're doing as far as expenditures and revenue, but we're not in a critical situation, and that was one of the things that we actually even put out in the information for the comptroller's position, because I think that's important as people look at a comptroller's position. What kind of fiscal situation is a municipality in? Because some people may not want to.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, you had significant issues.
Right, and you know, somebody that's a candidate for that position or thinks they might be, might not want to have to deal with an environment where there's a lot of fiscal stress. So do we need to be on top of it? Absolutely, but we're in good shape. We've been able to make some progress on capital projects, on infrastructure.
So I'm assuming this is how you have, when you have spoken before, you've unveiled and talked about capital and infrastructure projects. What's on the horizon? We talked obviously about Genesee Street.
Yep.
I'm going to go to the landfill in a few minutes, but what's on the horizon?
So the Owasco River Trail started in the fall. That's been a project that's been in the works for nearly a decade. That's finally getting off the ground. There's going to be a little scenic overlook thing, kitty corner to Hunter's Diner on the loop right there, that should be in place by Memorial Day, so you'll be able to watch your ducks go down the river there if that all sticks around. There's going to be some paving associated with that. About roughly half of the loop road will be resurfaced with that, so we're doing quite a bit of paving through some of these other projects. You may have noticed that McIntosh Drive has been closed down as they replace a culvert there. They are anticipating that next week they'll have that paved and opened up by the end of the month, and then they're going to switch over to Schwartz Drive. There's a culvert there they're going to work on. The North Division Street Bridge should be going out for bid relatively soon. That's a $4.5 million project.
And how long will that be shut down for?
That's going to probably be about an 18-month project, okay. 12 to 18 months. They're going to try to...
So people have to reroute through Aurelius Ave,
yes.
or over at Washington Street?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So they're going to try to reduce the period of time that the bridge is actually out of service to the extent that they can. But
so is the city running out of landfill space?
Yes.
So how much time do you have left?
We're looking at maybe 3 to 4 years.
So, and I want to say, as Yogi Berra would say, deja vu all over again. Many of us have been hearing this for 20 years. We're running out of space.
Yep.
Why is it different this time?
Because we're running out of space. So we looked at approximately 10 to 12 different options for expanding the current landfill in various ways in different areas of the footprint that's down there for the landfill.
In many of those cases, though, you'd have to get permission from the town of Troop.
One of those cases in particular, we'd have to get permission from the county and the town of Troop, and there are other issues there. So, you know, nobody wants a landfill in their backyard, seems to be, right? So that's an issue in and of itself. The proximity to the Owasco River as it flows through there becomes a problem. There's a gas line that runs through the property, and there are also high
So you haven't even
tension.
opened up conversations with Troop on that?
There had been some several years ago, it's my understanding, and that was not necessarily, it wasn't a real warm welcome.
It didn't go well.
Yeah, so we decided, you know, running a landfill is a business that's changed a lot over the years. I mean, even since the time that the city of Auburn has done it, a lot has changed. It's not just a hole in the ground that you throw stuff in and then you leave at the end of the day. The environmental regulations continue to change practically every year. There's something new. It becomes extremely expensive to run your own landfill.
So what do you see yourselves doing?
So what we're looking at doing, and the council has, by way of council resolution and funding, we're going to construct a transfer station. And so city residents that want to still go to the landfill in the afternoon, yeah, are going to be able to do that. But essentially what they'll do is they'll pull in and they'll put their trash in a truck that's there, and it'll get transferred to a larger container, and then it'll get hauled out of town.
And where will it get hauled to?
Well, that's something we'll have to determine at the time based on...
Because right now Seneca Meadows is not up. So does that mean the city, there is a talk of an incinerator in Seneca County. I don't know if that's going to be, is that a trash incinerator?
Yes.
Is that someplace the city might look to bring trash?
If that happened to be an option at the time, we would look at it based on what I'm hearing about the public reaction to that particular
we'll be talking
project.
To our next two guests about that as well.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll actually see that happen. So, you know, right now we've got Ontario County Landfill and we've got Seneca Meadows that could potentially be.
And so you're looking at cost structures that way.
Yeah, so it'll have to do with what their tipping fees are.
Does that mean that you would change the bag fee, the fees that you currently have on property?
We're hoping there may at some point be a slight increase, but what we've seen, and it's a little too soon to tell because we've still got a couple of years left with things, that there may have to be a slight increase, but even at that, it would still be significantly less than a private contractor to do the same work. And what we're aiming to do is make it so that essentially the typical homeowner doesn't see any change in service. That still the same schedule, still the same process. The only thing that would change is that there wouldn't be a landfill, but everything that happens in the street would be the same.
And it sounds like every city manager for the last 20 years has been dealing with this issue one way or the other.
Well, maybe I'll be the last one.
Maybe the last one. Our guest has been Auburn City Manager Jeff DYGERT. He's been on to give us a city update. He will be back in literally a month from today to give a budget update, hopefully, on where the city is on their budget process for their 2018-2019 budget that the city must adopt by July 1st. We'll be back in just a moment with another Inside Government featuring Owasco Town Supervisor Ed Wagner and County Planning Director Steve Lynch to talk about the Owasco watershed and its inspection process. Next Tuesday, the new chairman of the Cuyahoga County Legislature, Pat Mahunik, will be here joining us to give us a county update before the college goes on its April spring break. Before we go, just a quick note. We learned earlier today that Marty Stanton, who had drawn cartoons for The Citizen over the last 41 years, has passed away. Our thoughts and prayers go out to he and his family. He was a terrifically fine gentleman, a great loss to this community. We'll be back in just a few minutes with another Inside Government. We hope you'll stay with us. You can send us your thoughts and ideas at cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, but stick around for just a few more minutes.